We have been talking about redemption stories and how God changes us from the inside out, how God takes our past and He heals us from that. And everybody does have a story, and Crissy obviously has a story. That's why we've invited her to come and share this. It's pretty, I'll just tell you up front, we were talking before the service, she would not consider herself a professional speaker. That's why we're doing an interview style, just to kind of make it as safe and as comfortable as we can. And yet God has given her a message, and I think you'll notice as she shares that it's obvious that God is speaking through her. We'll talk more about that, kind of just let it unfold throughout the service. This is not your typical sermon. If you're taking notes, I don't know what notes you would take, but if you wish to take notes, you can. But we're just going to talk. I'm going to ask Crissy some questions, let her kind of unpack some of the things that she'd like to share. It's going to be kind of twofold. We're going to talk about her past, growing up here, and all that led to ending up in Los Angeles and Hollywood. But also going to talk about the new Crissy that is here today with us and that transformation that's taken place. And that's what's pretty exciting. So we're definitely going to get to that. So Crissy born and raised, grew up here in the Jacksonville area. And I was sharing with her today, I said, yeah, I know somebody that knew you and this. And she's like, oh my goodness, I really am back home. So it's a little nerve-wracking, I imagine. Now, you've been able to share at numerous churches over the last year or so. I know you might, Peace Church, I think in Wisconsin, you were sharing there. You were at Mars Hill with Mark Driscoll and some other churches. But still just kind of getting into this mode of being able to go to places and share your story. And so again, we welcome you to Orange Park. It's like coming home. Orange Park's close to where you're from, here in Jacksonville. So if you would, I'm just going to kind of open it up and ask you to just tell us about your story growing up. Anything you wish to tell us about growing up in Jacksonville and what that was like, and kind of what began to happen in your story as a child and as a teenager.
So I was born and raised here in Jacksonville, and as a child, I was extremely, extremely shy. Literally, when my mom would, we would talk to other people, I would hide behind my mom. I was that girl. And even in high school, I was extremely shy. I would take an F before I would stand up in front of the class. Wow. Yeah, it wasn't my thing. So actually, going into the industry was a lot against who I was. It wasn't who I really was.
Right.
Yeah.
You share a little bit about home life was a little stressful at times. I don't know if you want to go into that at all, but I know at some point your mom and dad kind of parted ways, and that kind of yeah.
When I was growing up, my dad we would all go to church when I was really young. It's in elementary school, but eventually my dad got kicked out of the church because he would stand up and call the pastor out on what he was teaching, and then he started drinking. So even though he would still teach us the Bible, but he was usually drinking. So it was a little confusing. But I did accept Jesus as my Savior when I was 11 years old, and I was baptized, and I did have faith. And I think that God gave me He gave me good discernment with knowing what was actually true and what my dad was kind of manipulating.
Right. Right. But you grew up in church. You have a story similar to a lot of people in our community that have a church background. I mean, we're in the Bible Belt, so there's that church connectivity there. So you're saying that as a child, church was really a part of your life. Mm-hmm. It may have been a little skewered because of some things going on with your dad, but you came to know Christ at age 11. Mm-hmm. And that might be, that might be eye-opening to some, going, "Oh my goodness, how did that happen at age 11?" So we'll get to what happens later on, about 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. But so at age 11, as a young girl, that's probably what 5th or 6th grade, mm-hmm. And you're very shy. So being a very shy young lady and sitting in front of this crowd speaking is just perfect, right? It works well. But so then you enter into junior high, middle school, high school years. Tell me about your adolescence as that kind of, you stepped into that.
Well, my parents ended up getting divorced when I was around 11, not long after I was baptized. And my dad kind of ran away with my brother and I to another city. So he moved us to Orlando, basically ran away with us. And I lived with my dad for a little while. And he was, drinking, and we were very, low income, and he drank most of the money that he made. And that was really stressful. My mom would come and visit on the weekends for a while, and then she just stopped coming because it was too chaotic. And actually, when my parents got divorced, I was very happy that they got divorced. I was very relieved because I felt like I just couldn't stand seeing my mom being abused and everything by my dad. So I lived with my dad when I first started middle school. And when I was about to go into high school, I ended up moving in with my mom because I thought that would be more stable. And I thought since I was becoming a woman, I should be with my mom. So I moved in with her, and she had remarried, and that family dynamic was a lot different. It was more stable, but in a lot of ways, I felt that I needed a lot more attention than what I got.
Okay. So you're back with your mom, and you're in high school. You're a teenager. Boyfriends come into the story. Relationships. That's kind of the typical story. Most teens, either they're in a relationship or want to be in a relationship or need to be in a relationship. And so is that typical for you? Is that what happened in your story as well?
Well, I didn't share this earlier, but my dad had this obsession with my sexuality. So he raised me to be a virgin until I got married. And he was very tough on me about that, and he would, get drunk, and he would talk about it to his drunk friends, like, my daughter's going to be virgin. I don't know what his obsession with that was. And then, I moved in with my mom, and she was more if you're going to have sex, just let me know. So I was very confused about that, and so living with my dad was really difficult. And I moved in with my mom.
Right.
And, like I said, I felt neglected and I didn't get enough attention. I spent a lot of my teenage years isolated in my bedroom, daydreaming, listening to music, and I felt very alone. So I wasn't allowed to date as early as some other people. I wasn't allowed to date till I was 17. And when I did start dating, I had a boyfriend for a couple of years in high school. And I realized early on that having a boyfriend filled this emptiness inside me, and it made me feel validated, like I was worth something. So that started, that entered into my 20s, relationship addiction. So I felt when I was single that I was, there's no purpose for me if I'm single.
Right.
So I went into my early 20s, and it was harder to meet men because I didn't have a lot of friends. Basically, when I was in high school, still, the dating this guy, I ended up getting pregnant because the whole sexual thing was so confusing to me, and I knew. I needed whatever it was that was so, everybody was being obsessed about, I didn't want any part of it. So I became sexually active, and I got pregnant. And my boyfriend at the time said that if you get pregnant, we'll get married and have a family. And so that sounded like the perfect solution to, this emptiness inside of me. But when I did get pregnant, he decided that college was more important and that he didn't want me to have the baby. And it was very difficult, but he took me to get an abortion, which was actually the third most traumatic thing that happened to me in my life. The other thing was I was sexually abused when I was younger. So, so that was pretty difficult. So, and then back to where I was talking about relationship addiction.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to meet guys. I didn't have any friends, so I started putting my pictures on websites.
You were out of high school at this point. You were a young adult. Now let me just back up a little bit. Your boyfriend at the time had made this promise. We get married, life will be good. It's the perfect story, but he didn't come through with that promise. In fact, he went the total different direction.
Yeah.
And so that kind of just gives you the relationship, the lies mixed with what you think might be true. It seems like a lot of confusion there. Yeah. So now you're speaking of relationship addiction. I've used to working with students, working with adults. Let me make sure we're defining this correctly. You're saying you had your validation only if you were somebody's girlfriend at the time, if you were in a relationship. If Facebook was around and single was checked, not in a relationship, then there was a problem. Yeah. That's how you felt. Is that right? And so you were looking for that relationship. Now that the relationship with the boyfriend is now over, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That ended after I had the abortion. I went into deep depression, and I broke up with him. Okay. So
now you're a young adult, and you're looking for relationships. Yeah, not just back to where you were. You said you started looking at modeling or putting photographs up of yourself.
Yeah, I found a lot of online dating sites, and this is like, it was a long time ago. So internet was kind of still a new thing, and I had ended up moving back home when I was 22.
Okay.
And after I was in a relationship with a guy, and we were cohabitating, and that didn't work out. And I ended up moving back home, and that's when I started getting online. We had a computer in a bedroom where nobody could see, and I would get on there, and I would go in chat rooms, and I put my pictures on some modeling, or I put them on the dating sites, and I would go and meet men in different states even. Wow. And just because I needed somebody. I wanted to get married and have a baby because that meant I was worthy of love. And then from that, I ended up finding the modeling websites. Okay. And I started putting my pictures up on modeling websites that were amateur models. Just anybody could take pictures, put them up, have a portfolio, and people would contact you to do shoots. So for a long time, it was very flattering to me at the time that people wanted to pay me to do shoots, but the type of shoots that they wanted me to do were nude, like from topless to like hardcore porn. Right. So for the longest time, I turned down shoots, but it was still flattering to me.
Sure.
And after one really bad breakup, and I felt really down, I ended up taking my first shoot.
Okay. And so all those relationship issues, the relationship addiction, a lot of lies about sexuality, and mixed messages kind of just pile one upon the other, and here you end up in this online dating site. It's probably not christianmingle.com, right?
No, however, I did do that one.
You do? Okay. Well, it was a different day, right? So in those websites, or on those websites, you found, and it's amazing how people through the internet, they probably don't always tell you the truth. I don't know. It's just a thought, right? So there may be you're meeting people in different states that you meet online.
Yeah, and a lot of these people were not who they said they were.
What? Are you serious? So that guy that's on the internet that looks like Brad Pitt looks more like an armpit when you see him, right? So you're meeting these guys, and there were probably, we talk, we hear about stories, people that make up false personas. They're married and they're not online. So you end up with all these stories that kind of just come out as well. So
yeah, I was roofied when I was doing online dating. There was lots of bad things that happened. It was very dangerous. Yeah. But that just shows you where I was. I was very broken.
Sure.
And yeah.
Okay, so you're working somewhere in Jacksonville. So you have a job, but there's something missing inside. So you're online. You're posting these modeling shoots, and then all of a sudden, the latest breakup happens, and you said, "Hey, whatever." And so there you are. You just go into that, and so that question was, how did you enter into this industry? It sounds like you kind of just kind of fell into it, and then once you're there, what happened? We use the word, it's like a whirlwind, when all of a sudden, you're this little girl from Jacksonville, right? And you're just online dating, and you're just looking for somebody to say that you're beautiful, and they want to marry you and have children with you, and then one thing leads to the next, and you're a model. And you're doing things you probably never thought you would do, but wow, here you are. What happened next? How did you ended up, you didn't stay in Jacksonville, so what happens next?
Yeah, well, I did a lot of cohabitating. So while I was in the industry, I lived with one guy, and he, shot pictures of me. And that kind of followed me throughout the industry. Anybody I dated was a part of it.
Okay.
They would do the pictures, they would have take my money, and
So you ended up in California at that point?
Yeah, I ended up going to California with one of the boyfriends. He was abusive. He actually reminded me a lot of my dad.
Okay.
And I never thought I would get involved in an abusive relationship, and especially not for 3.5 years. 3.5 years of the 6 years I was in the industry, I dated this guy. We basically moved across the country together. And, these extreme behaviors were part of who I was at the time, because I didn't feel like my life had any meaning. So I left my job here in Jacksonville one day and just moved across the country. And and then living out there, things escalated. I started doing more shoots, started getting a website up, and things started taking off in that industry. But my goal wasn't to be famous. And sometimes that's the case with other women. They want to be famous. All I wanted was to feel loved, and anything could keep me going.
Yeah.
At that time.
So you're in California. Your boyfriend is setting up your website and or taking photos, and everything's semi-normal because you're in a relationship, but you're addicted to that relationship. That's why you're sitting here kind of reminiscing, going, how did I stay in a relationship for 3.5 years with a guy that was so abusive, and yet you were addicted to the relationship as much as you were to him, it sounds like. But so he puts the website up, or the websites are there.
Well, it was already up.
Okay.
I started it in Jacksonville.
Okay.
But with each person that I dated, things got a little more into it.
Okay.
They would, I guess, looking back, I can see that they didn't have, they didn't love me.
Right.
At the time, I thought that this is what I had to do to be loved, is to use my sexuality. And I used to listen to the radio on the way home, and I remember there was one radio station, and every time you turn on the radio, they would be saying, "Oh, we have the Hooters girls here," and I thought that's what I needed to be. And I kind of lost my dignity by thinking that was, thinking that's what I needed to be, and following that.
It sounds like that the continual thread that runs through this, from little girl to 11 years old to high school and dating, you're looking for love. You're looking for someone to love you and to speak into your heart of who you truly are. Now, my perspective is that's not any different than anybody else. It's just your story ended up where it did. I think every young lady, I think, looks for the same thing. I think young men are also looking for some answers to some questions as well. And so the world really offers some options. They just tend to be false answers that don't last, it sounds like.
Exactly.
So.
And, after my parents divorced, we stopped going to church. So I didn't really feel like God was present in my life. And another thing is, I felt like if he was, then why is all this bad stuff happening to me? I was using drugs, I was being abused, just putting myself in bad situations. And then part of me just wanted to die because I felt like there was no hope.
Oh, wow. So I've heard that many times as well. Why would God let this happen to me? Why would God let this happen? Now, I'm not saying everything's easy now, but you're kind of on the other side of it now, looking back and seeing how God could even use difficult circumstances. Of course, at the time, no one likes the verse in Scripture. It says all things work together for those that love the Lord, because at the time you're going through stuff that is not hard. It's hard to see the end.
Yeah.
It's hard to see what God's doing. Well, we're speaking about an industry, the adult industry, the porn industry. you said it's like a whirlwind when you ended up there, and all of a sudden you're in LA, you're in this industry, and it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, globally, but especially here in the States. It has been, I don't know if for the right, it's been normalized into culture. From the inside out, looking at it, what would you say is, from your perspective, one of the reasons you think, or one of the tools that's been used to kind of push the porn industry out of the back shadows, so to speak, and the back alleys to prominent, porn stars and adult actors and actresses are on Entertainment Tonight? I mean, it's not. That wasn't happening 20 years ago.
No,
so
it wasn't. When I first got, I mean, it's changed a lot since I've been in the industry. I think definitely the internet has a lot to do with it, and smartphones, like anybody can look at it, and I'll talk about more what I do now, but we work with youth, and they all have phones.
Yeah.
So it's very common for a child to get addicted at a young age.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the internet has a lot to do with it. I think music has a lot to do with it.
Sure.
That was very influential to me.
The music was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Music was,
yeah.
always. I don't know why, but that was just, my thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mentioned, you mentioned the internet being a powerful tool. Let's go ahead and just clarify some things now, so to make sure you get this, because I've already had messages from church members. Good questions. If this is Crissy. She's got a new story. She has one internet site. If you Google her name, you're going to find more than one internet site. And if you go to the wrong site, that's a site, I guess, that is still owned by somebody else. Or the name is not. You don't own it, and you don't own the name, and you don't own the images, and so all that's there is the old Crissy, and you can't get that off the internet.
No, that's going to be there forever. Even if the site came down, these pictures have been downloaded on people's hard drives. They're always going to be there. The fans have forums that they go on and chat and share their favorite porn stars and all that kind of stuff, and they share pictures. It's always out there. It's always going to be there, and there's nothing that I can do about it.
Wow.
I mean, and then the website, I signed a contract. I basically signed my life away on this website. And, when I left the industry, I left the money. I could still be getting an income from that website steadily, because people put their credit cards in and they forget. It doesn't say it on their bill that it's for this website. It's all they make it to where you don't know what it is anymore.
That's so the wives won't know the husbands have paid for that.
Exactly.
Or the parents won't know the children. So here's the website. newcrissymoran.com. That's the only website she has. That's the only one you should be able to get through our filters to. It's the only one, if you're looking for what she's doing and her story, that's the only one that you should look at. Any other website with her name on it is not hers. And as far as Twitter, it's the same thing. Her Twitter account is I am Crissy. And that's Crissy without an H, so Crissy. And so any other Twitter account, because Twitter is probably as unfiltered as anything out there. And so, Twitter has as much as anything else. And then, so Facebook is the other one. And there's only one Facebook page. And so if you're a fan or if you like a Facebook page, the only Facebook page is Real Crissy Moran. And so you need to be aware of that. And we understand the attraction and the addictive aspect of the internet. The internet is just a tool, but it's not just Crissy. It's all those sites, and there's a new one up every day, I'm sure. So they're just flooding the internet with that, and you won't even have to be searching, and you'll find it. They'll just hit. But let's go back to this, just briefly, because I know we have some students in here. And maybe adults as well that probably need to hear this. Every image that's up there is always going to be up there. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it's a good word to all the teenagers who have smartphones that are posting pictures on Snapchat, which they think isn't saved, but it is, which is an incredible voyeuristic app for your phone. Then there's Facebook. When you post a picture to Facebook, guess who owns the right to the picture once you post it? Not you. Facebook owns it, so does Instagram. They can use it for anything they choose. So once an image is uploaded, be careful. Just know that it may not be images that she had uploaded, but they're not yours anymore, because once it's there forever, even if you delete it from your account. It doesn't really delete it. And so a little FYI for internet usage and for just some safety aspects regarding that. Let me just step into this a little more. We want to, it's already about a quarter after, which has been good so far. Let's talk about new Crissy Moran. That's our website, but there's also a new Crissy. This is 2013. It was back in 2006, right? And why don't you share, I know at some of your other events, you've shared a little bit about that in 2006. Why don't you talk about that moment? I think you were at a movie set and just kind of how that all unfolded there.
Yeah, I was dating somebody who worked in mainstream movies, and I have gone to the set with him a couple nights before. He was out of this. He was in Albuquerque, and it's crazy, but I always thought that even if I was in the industry, that my boyfriend should be faithful to me. Because of the stuff that I didn't work with men. And a lot of them, you know, they liked that I was in the industry. So I had an expectation that when I did meet the right guy, that he would, you know, I would stop doing the industry and we would have a normal life. Mm-hmm. So most of these guys, I would say, you know, shouldn't I start transitioning out of this and talk about marriage and stuff like that. So in this last relationship that I had before I left the industry, we were together, I think a year and a half, and he went out of town to work on this movie, and he ended up going to a strip club, and that was something I was like totally against, because I wanted him to be faithful to me, and I didn't. From growing up, I knew. Can
I just say that to the average audience member, that for the person that's in the porn industry to say, I am just totally against a strip club, sounds, I mean, it really just sounds very, how does that even fit? But to go deeper from what you're saying is that your expectation was once you found the right guy, regardless in the industry, that everything you were doing would end, and it would be the happy white picket fence, you'd get married and everything would be good. So this
I thought I would meet the guy that would be like, okay, I want you to get out of this industry. Like, I thought he would rescue
you. Okay.
You know?
Okay.
So anyway, he went to a strip club, lied to me about it, and it broke my heart because he was the most normal guy that I had dated up to that point. And so anyway, it broke my heart. I fell to the ground. I was talking to him on the phone, fell to the ground, cried out to God, and I was like, if you're real, I need to know. Everything that I know about love up to this point is perverted and twisted, and you know, I just sat there on the kitchen floor crying for I don't even know how long, and it really broke my heart. And a couple days later, I went out to where he was on a movie set, and he wanted me to come out. He felt really bad because he lied to me about the strip club and everything, so he wanted to make things right. And so I met some of the guys that he was working on this film with, and when he wasn't around, I was sitting there, and this guy, he was sitting next to me, and he said, so what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I'm a model, and usually I didn't talk about what I did as far as porn, and I would try to avoid that question altogether in my real life. And he said, well, what kind of modeling? And so I made up some stuff, and I said, you know, Hawaiian tropics and calendars and all kinds of stuff. And but he still, you know, he wasn't convinced. He's like, yeah, well, what kind of calendars? Like, even more questions. And I was like, oh. So I finally said, I do adult stuff. I do porn. And he said, I already knew that because your boyfriend had already told everybody before you got here, and he was showing people your pictures. And even though I was in the industry, I always thought that the guy who loved me would not be showing people pictures, even though it's very accessible.
Right.
I thought that he would respect me more with people in our normal life not to do that. So when he said that, I felt really embarrassed and ashamed, and you know, I looked down, and the next thing he says, let me ask you something, do you believe in God? And I knew, like at that very moment, that God had sent him to speak to me, because nobody had said anything about God to me in many, many years. And I said, yeah, I do. And he goes, and he started talking about his love for me and, you know, about, you know, what I was doing and basically telling me that the place in my heart that was so empty could only be filled by Jesus. And it asking me if I believed it. And, you know, I teared up. We went outside and prayed, and I rededicated my life to the Lord. And at that moment, I didn't accept any more money from the industry, even though I was making a good income monthly, just not even doing anything. It was just kept coming in. So that's what God told me to do. He told me to give up the money and to trust Him that He was going to provide for me, and you know, let Him prove Himself to me. So that's what I did, and that,
Well, it wasn't easy. I'm sure the step to faith to trust Him financially, you know, doesn't mean that immediately you had the same amount of money coming in from different areas. So
no, I had to give up a lot of things. It was definitely worth it, but at the time it was like terrifying. It's like no car. I had hair extensions. Those came out.
Same here.
My nails came out. I couldn't tan anymore. That was my identity.
Yeah.
Even in relationships, my identity was still to be sexy and hot and this person who, you know, just not who I really was. But that's what that's who I became. And so to give all that stuff up was very devastating. I gained weight. I got cystic acne, like all over my face. And, you know, I can see now how that was probably good for me, but at the time it was devastating.
Yeah. This was 2006, okay? The Florida Times-Union ran an article, did an interview with Crissy. They ran an article about her, gosh, not very long after that. And at that article, she had a MySpace page. Remember MySpace? She had a MySpace page. And so I went on MySpace and I messaged her and said, hey, I just read that article. That's an incredible story. I'm a pastor at a church in Jacksonville. I know you're from Jacksonville. She had a picture of her wearing a Matt Jones jersey, if you remember that. Jaguars. I mean, going back in time, right? And I'm like, so if you're ever back in Jacksonville, and then I'm sitting here going, maybe, you know, she sent me her Gmail, and I'm emailing her with my wife copied on every email. And I'm going to make sure that's clear. And that's a stipulation on her end. I mean, that's what she says. So that's perfect. She has to do that, and that's perfect for any communication. And basically my message was, man, I'd love to have you come share sometime, but I don't know what venue, and I don't know that we're ready, and I don't know that you're ready. So 6 years later, and I think that in the Christian world, we tend to do this, and you probably felt the pressure to do this as well. When a person of notoriety or any form of celebrity comes to Christ or comes back to Christ, there is a sense of let's hurry up and put them on a pedestal and let's tour them around the country. And so, unfortunately, sometimes that happens. And I think there has to be some seasoning. I think there has to be some time of growth. And so 6 years, 7 years now, as we're working into this series, I think it's just recently, within the last year or so, you've started to speak. I know Mark Driscoll had you out and able to bring you here today just to briefly kind of share that story. To what happens in that industry is obviously women are objectified. They're two-dimensional beings. They're not human beings. And we know, as you said, the internet has just moved this industry into everybody's cell phone and bedroom and living room and office computer and everything else at incredible levels, the billion-dollar industry that it is. Is there a message you would have to men, to husbands, to sons, or even to women who, because the number of women that are online now is increasing, what would be just a brief message to that group that unfortunately you come into a church and there's probably a lot of people that are in the churches that you're speaking at that knew your face, knew you, before that you were on the bulletin or the program saying guest speaker, and unfortunately probably knew you as a two-dimensional image. What would you say?
I work in a, I sell women's clothes. I work in a women's clothing store. And what's really grieves me is that, you know, when I got my job, I told my boss what my past was. He had no idea until he Googled me and he saw a Nightline and he was like, oh my gosh. But the girls that I work with, they're in college, and each one of them they found out, and they think my past is the coolest thing ever, and it just breaks my heart. And you know, one of the girls a couple days ago, she said, we were like in another section of the store where nobody was, and she's like, I need to ask you a question. She goes, but it's gonna get weird. It's gonna get really, really weird, really quick. And I'm like, okay. I knew what she was gonna say, so she asked me if I used to do porn, and she's like, that's the coolest thing. I wish I was that brave, because I would totally do it. And I'm like, no, it's not cool. You become an object. Okay. And so that really broke my heart, because all of the girls thought it was cool, and they don't understand the reality of it. And it is degrading. Anytime you become an object, you don't have the upper hand. Right. You're not taking control of your sexuality.
It's not liberating.
It's not liberating.
Yeah. I think as Driscoll said, it was some really astronomical percentage of women in the industry would get out if they could. Mm-hmm. If they could give up the money, if they could give up, if they had any other option, they would get out. Yeah,
it becomes a trap.
Yeah.
It really does. And I would also say to the women that you do not have to have a man to be worthy of love. That was a big mistake I made.
You didn't need a man to validate you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. Now, once you come to understand that you don't need a man in this relationship addiction to validate you as a woman, then God in His sovereignty brings a man. Mm-hmm. And last May, you now are in a relationship. Not just a relationship, but you're married, so congratulations on your marriage. Last May, you're not living in California any longer, and you're involved in a ministry. You're selling clothes. You're almost all those things you said that you wish you had, that you thought would happen. It seems to be systematically falling into place. But your husband was not able to be here today, but he's back home, and of course he knows who you used to be, but he also knows who you are now. And
our relationship didn't happen overnight. God had to do a lot of work on me. I was not ready to be in a relationship, and it was like people would tell me that. I would be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Right. I'm ready to be in a relationship. I'm ready to get married and have kids. But the truth of it wasn't until I took a break from dating and learned and did healing, deep inner healing, and learned what a healthy relationship should look like, and all that stuff, that then God put the right guy in my life. And even then, we had a friendship for over a year before we even dated. And it was like a courtship. We remained pure through our relationship, and now we're married. But you know, it took me giving up what I thought was the most important thing for God to give me this relationship.
Yeah. So you said a lot had to happen to you before you could enter into this marriage. I imagine the same is for him, knowing in the same story. But here you are together, and still in the honeymoon stage. I mean, everything's very exciting. You're doing ministry, and you mentioned a little bit about that earlier.
Yeah, we do ministry together. He does a lot of stuff without me, but I'm a part of it. So we go to skate parks, and in Houston, that's where I live now. There's some really big skate parks, and most of the kids skate. So we go out there and we give away free skateboards. And the ministry is called Middleman Skateboards. So as soon as he gives out a board, he tells them do you know what middleman means? And tells them middleman is another name for Jesus, and he shares the gospel right away. Wow. And So we talk to hundreds of kids. When we go to the skate park, my husband knows all these kids. Those are his friends. And he doesn't have friends his age. But yeah, he wears like the skater socks and everything. I'm like, you can't wear that when we're going on dates. You gotta dress your age. But yeah, so we do that. And then on Sundays, we take it further and we do discipleship. So we take the kids to church. And then after that, we do like a little group where we talk about what happened, talk about what's going on in their lives, and pray with them.
That's pretty incredible. And you said those kids already know who you are.
Yeah, some of them already have known me from my past.
So they're seeing the new you, which is a great message for these young guys. And
they come from, most of them come from broken families. They have single moms. And so one of the reason I'm involved, which my husband will go out and skateboard all day. I don't do that. I'll go on Sundays. But the reason I want to be involved, because we want to model what a healthy relationship should look like. One of the examples is, my husband, we were, I guess we were at the skate park, I can't remember, but he had to walk away, and he told one of the kids, stay here with Crissy and make sure she's okay. And like he had a sense of pride that he was going to be able to like take care of me, and they're opening doors for me and all this stuff. Wow. So it's very fulfilling. We don't have kids of our own, so not yet. Yeah. And who knows what the future holds for that, but we're able to touch other people's lives in that way.
That's great. Well, Crissy, your time here, we could talk for another hour or so, which we will, but in another service. And so we're going to have to come to a close here at this point. I hope, folks, that you're hearing her heart, and you're hearing the story of a little girl who was looking for love and the answer to her heart question. And finally, as a woman, found the answer to that question. And that she is beautiful and that she is lovely, and it has nothing to do with that industry or any of those things physically, but it has everything to do with her heart and who she is. And it is a story of redemption. And while Crissy's story took her down a road that many of you probably haven't taken, though who knows? I don't know all of your stories. Her story and our story, your story, my story, it's similar in this. Apart from Christ, we have nothing. Jesus Christ is the Redeemer. He is the healer. He is the one who fills that gap within our heart that only He can. And He's the only one that can validate us. If you're going to anybody else for validation, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, you're not going to get the validation that only God can give, because that's His role. And so I pray you know this Jesus we speak of today. I pray you recognize that Crissy's story is unique, but it is also very common in the sense that we all are redeemed, those of us that know Him. And I'm proud that she had the courage to come and share, because that's not easy to share when you've escaped the past, and to be touring the country talking about it is not easy, especially in your hometown. And that's why we turn the corner and talk a lot about the new Crissy Moran, the one who is married, the one who is doing ministry, the one that is still being attacked by the enemy and still is being accused by the enemy. But she knows who she is, and she has a name. Her name, as I shared last week, Crissy, her full name is, I looked it up just to see what it meant. It too means Christ bearer. And I think that's appropriate today, because that's what she's done. She's borne the message of Christ.